Welcome to the Get Fit Guys, quick and dirty tips to get moving and shape up. My name is Brock Armstrong and I am the Get Fit Guy. After reading his new book, Peak, The New Science of Athletic Performance that is Revolutionizing Sport, well, I couldn't wait to do a deeper dive into habits and mindset with the author, Dr. Marc Bubbs, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. As the guest on today's podcast episode points out in his new book, there is a revolution going on in the world of sports these days. More and more athletes are spending more and more time focusing on a game-changing combination of recovery and mindset, rather than just training alone. The notion of no pain, no gain is losing favor in the sports community, and it's being replaced by a more sensible and a well-balanced approach, and I find this idea both intriguing and encouraging. A while ago, I wrote about a study from the British Journal of Sports and Medicine called Lifestyles and Mindsets of Olympic, Paralympic, and World Champions. Is an integrated approach the key to elite performance? It examined how factors other than training affected a sample of world-class champion athletes. And that study concluded, and I quote, "Championship performance is likely to occur at the intersection of psychological prowess, interpersonal support, effective performance strategies, and lifestyle." End quote. In other words, there's more to being a champion than simply nailing all of your workouts. Marc Bubbs' book, Peak, The New Science of Athletic Performance that's Revolutionizing Sport, explores some similar fundamentals of high performance, among many others. It focuses on the importance of consistency, not extreme effort, and the value of patience, not rapid transformation. Now, without further delay, here is my conversation with Dr. Marc Bubbs, and I asked him to start by giving us a little bit of his background.
Yeah, well, listen, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm from Canada, from Toronto. Background in sport growing up, played loads of different sports and had a real interest in nutrition and exercise and how these things impact overall health. And when I was actually doing my undergraduate degree at University of British Columbia, thinking about going into medicine and started shadowing, GPs and various docs, and the visits were pretty short and it didn't seem like nutrition was really on anybody's radar back then. And not a lot of time to even talk movement with folks in terms of being able to help them out. And so, for me, that dissuaded me a little bit. I was unsure which direction to go next. And like most kids, 20 years ago, decided to go backpacking and, roam around the world a little bit. And it was, it took me to some places where people lived a long time, places like Costa Rica and Japan. And you started to realize that, how you move and how you eat and all these lifestyle factors were really a key part of the whole longevity and health and happiness process. So when I came back to Canada, thankfully in parts of Canada, Toronto, Vancouver, there's a naturopathic medicine, which is a 4-year full medical degree that you can do that has more of a focus on things like that in terms of nutrition and exercise. Because for me, it was all about helping people out who were struggling with weight gain, obesity, prediabetes, cardiovascular disease. And even as I started into my clinical work, realizing how much things like low mood were impacting. And of course, along that journey, I was still out on the sports side, and I work with Canada Basketball as the director of performance nutrition.
Nice.
And that's been a really fascinating thing as well. When growing up, we had one player in the NBA, Steve Nash, Hall of Famer from out west, obviously. And now, we've got 15 guys in the NBA, and it's obviously with the Raptors and the explosion in popularity, it's been a really amazing ride. And yeah, my practice is kind of dovetails on those two ends in terms of this performance side with athletes. And then the themes are actually very similar to what we use with clients in practice, general public, people like, myself trying to get enough sleep and eat the right things in the day so that you can perform at work and have enough energy to, when you're at home to spend some quality time with family and friends.
Right. That really is a bit of a trick. Like we do tend to get a lot of sort of trickle down advice and information from the pro athletes of the world. And then we try to apply it to ourselves, even though we're not necessarily achieving those types of fitness goals, and or even doing the amount of training. And that really does result in a lot of confusion.
For sure.
Do you see that a lot in your practice? Like people coming in and like showing you the workouts that they found online, or the meal plan they found online, and trying to figure out how that fits into their life?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when you really take a deeper dive, there's some terrific themes that really translate from the elite world to the rest of us. But you're very right in the sense that what we see in the media, what tends to get portrayed is sort of the shiny new toys of what they might be doing 1% of the time. And we get this feeling like that's how hard they're pushing all the time in terms of the intensity they train or what they might be doing with their nutrition. But the real overarching theme, and one of the big themes for myself and working with athletes and clients, is this idea of consistency, which is, it sounds so simple, but when we look at the research around training, even around nutrition, it's less about what strategy you picked and far more about, did you show up every day, every week, every month for the whole year? Did you show up and do the workout? Did you stick to the diet? Because if you did, those are the people who actually won the race and actually achieved their success and maintained it. And so it is a little bit like the tortoise and the hare, because I know when a lot of people get motivated, it's that first week or 2 or 4 weeks, you've got all this energy and motivation. Then all of a sudden, by week 8, it's half of the program. And then by, 3 months in, all of a sudden work's too busy or something is happening at home, and you lose track of what you were doing. You're not able to maintain it. And so that's something that I really try to hammer home. And it's amazing that when we look at the evidence-based research, that's the big theme there as well. So whether you're on the athletic side or general population, that's something that you've got to really take into consideration.
You have a new book out called Peak, the New Science of Athletic Performance, that is revolutionizing sports.
There you go.
And I have it right in front of me, in fact, on my iPad. The majority of the book was just one of those things of just marking every page. Like you start off and you think, oh, I'll just mark a couple of these pages to go back to. And it's like page after page had the little folded down corner thing in the Kobo.
Nice.
But chapter 11 in particular, and what this really goes to what you were just talking about, you talk about habits and how we can actually use habit forming or habit building to bypass this need to rekindle or rely on motivation. I found that to be really, really powerful, because we do have a problem, like you were saying, with the consistency being so key. And when people are having to rely on, I think in the book you refer to going on Instagram and finding the motivational quotes or something every single morning to get yourself to the gym, it's a lot easier to rely on habits. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's definitely something that we assume that these athletes or people who are high performers have this motivation that they have every day to get up and do the thing that they're doing. But really, that's not the case. And before I dive into that, how that translates to habits, I just want to highlight on the emotion side how 75% of doctors' visits are stress related. Okay. If you're working 70 plus hours a week, if you're working long hours, if you're not getting enough sleep, you effectively get changes in your brain in terms of areas. The amygdala is the area that's responsible for threat. And so that begins to enlarge, and we get weaker connections between the amygdala, that area of threat, and the prefrontal cortex. So all of a sudden, negative thoughts start to percolate and increase. And this can be sort of the environment that we're in terms of, we're looking for inspiration, we're looking for motivation. And yet, there's this negativity or, this current that's going to be pulling us in the opposite direction. So it is important to, we talk about inspiration being like lighting a match. It's sort of instantaneous. It gives you a bit of a spark, and you can go and do something, a new diet, new exercise. Motivation is being able to kindle that a little bit more. And when we even think of discipline, we often say, again, once you have enough motivation, you start to develop some discipline in terms of getting up every morning to hit that workout and put the miles in on your run, get to that yoga class, whatever it might be. And we sometimes assume that discipline is also this limitless characteristic or quality. And really it's not. I mean, even the best of the best, Navy SEALs have only so much discipline. And so this is where trying to build some automaticity, these habits, what we call. And the classic example is every time you get into your car, I guarantee you don't think about putting your seatbelt on.
No.
you get in the car, and just being in that environment, there's this automatic thing that happens, and you put your seatbelt on, and there's no thinking, there's no inspiration, motivation, or discipline involved at all. You just sort of do it. And when we look at the research around this stuff, it's this idea of contextual cues that start to trigger a lot of our behaviors. And unfortunately for a lot of us, these go in the negative sense to start with. The classic one is, long day, you get home late, maybe you don't have time to cook, or maybe you do have dinner, and then it's all of a sudden it's a snacking on the couch in front of the television, or even worse yet, in bed. And all of a sudden that becomes a contextual cue, right? Just being on the couch watching TV, all of a sudden we're going to get into sort of this mindless eating, or, again, around exercise, it can be a similar thing in terms of your capacity or ability to be able to get up and go train or hit that lunchtime workout. So it really is important to try to develop those disciplines into habits and develop that automaticity. And when we look at the research, they talk a lot about this idea of 3 weeks for habit change. I mean, when I looked into the research, that was effectively around plastic surgery patients getting used to their new, physical features. So it doesn't totally translate, but
not totally. No.
Yeah. So what I've found there was it said 66 days on average. So we think sort of 2 months being a good framework of trying to develop of some of these habits, and that way you can kind of chunk it to be able to build those habits in. And the nice thing is, once you can start to build those habits or that automatic reaction, you don't need to use as much willpower to do them. You just sort of get up and do it without having to think. And that's ultimately, whether we're talking training or nutrition, that's when the real magic starts to happen in terms of progress.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially with the idea that habits can be both good and bad, whether the habit becomes having a snack on the couch or in bed, like you said, or it becomes just automatically going to the gym or making that healthy choice for breakfast or whatever it happens to be. It's a double-edged sword.
Absolutely.
In the book, you talked about how to use self-talk to generate some habits and to reach some fitness goals, and I feel like that's something that my listeners could really dig into. Can you sum that up?
Absolutely. I mean, again, this is that example I used around this idea of us, the typical person, being very busy and not getting enough sleep, and these changes that happen in the brain, and so we're more likely to have negative thoughts due to that, as well as from an evolutionary standpoint. Our minds are hardwired to look for threats because that's how we survived for thousands and thousands of years. And so all of a sudden we're in this sort of soup, that this environment that creates more negative thinking, and our subconscious is always taking this in. And again, you think, well, elite performers, the best in the world, they must not have this problem, right? Like somebody like Serena Williams, perhaps the greatest female tennis player of all time.
Yeah. Oh,
there's no way she's not ever confident, right? Well, I mean, could you imagine, 5 or 6 years ago, she's already won, double-digit major championships. And you could see her between changeovers and games opening up a little book and reading out these lines in the book, this positive self-talk. You will move up. You will add spin. You will win Wimbledon. And you think, okay, wait a minute. This is the best, the most elite tennis player on the planet. And even she needs to continue to lay down these fundamentals to be able to achieve the kind of success she wants. And, when you look back at some of the original research, renowned professors like William Hart from University of Alabama, the language that we actually use to describe our situation, which oftentimes is happening internally, obviously, and this is in sport or in life, this actually determines how we see it, how we experience it, and how we participate in it. And so that whole idea of mindset is such a huge factor in all this, has a huge influence on, again, your experience in the moment and also how you perceive it on the back end. So I think that's one where, again, there's various different ways of doing it. Adding some positive affirmations like I am willing, fill in the blank. I am resilient, fill in the blank. But consciously doing this, which for some people they gravitate to this, and it's sort of something that for them it's okay. This resonates with me. I'm going to be doing this. For other people, it's not necessarily. But and it's ironic that those are the folks that tend to get, in my experience and in practice, the most benefit from it, right? And so this can be as quick as jotting down in your diary, daytime, or calendar, 3 or 4 lines. Just takes a couple minutes every morning on some of these themes that you're trying to to reverse or achieve. And it is amazing how just writing these things out, and it can sound a little hokey, but just writing these things out, and all of a sudden, a week later, 2 weeks later, it's amazing the shift you can get in mindset.
Well, and the idea that it's a positive self-talk rather than what I think a lot of us sort of default to, which is like, oh, you stupid idiot, why didn't you do that? You're so dumb. You're so lazy. Why don't you get off your butt and get it done? But instead of beating ourselves up, if we turn it into like Serena Williams' example there of reinforcing that I am going to move forward, I am going to win this match. That really does, then going back to the habits, that'll sort of move us towards those habits as well, right?
Absolutely. And the big part here is, again, if type A folks, you want high achievers, athletes, whatever you want to call it, again, we often think that they don't need these strategies, but as you just mentioned, their own inner self-talk can be downright vicious to themselves and can really be harmful in a sense. And so we do have to watch out how, just as the example you gave there of how we talk about, oh, why did you do that? And the language that you might use to describe yourself, you've got to watch how you do that, because it can, Bruce Lipton, who's a famous neuroscientist, says that 95% of what we're doing every single day is driven by our subconscious. So we have this perception like our cortex, our thinking brains controlling everything, but really a lot of this stuff's happening at the subconscious level. And that's where effectively we dive into some of this in that chapter that you mentioned there, Brock, around self-compassion. And this even has been shown to outperform positive self-talk. So if you start layering in some positive self-talk, and self-compassion is this idea of, it's tough out there for everybody. Don't be so hard on yourself. We're all in a tough situation, or other people are also in a tough situation. And using various techniques like that, you can again start to reverse that inner self-talk and also improve just, again, your relationship with your inner dialogue, so to speak.
Yeah, it's interesting. We obviously started this conversation talking about fitness and health and wellness and stuff in terms of being an athlete, but everything that we've just been talking about, everything that you just said, can really applies to just everyday life, like being successful at whatever you're doing, not necessarily just fitness or sport.
And again, that was like the impetus for the book there, Brock, was just around, these themes that are so prevalent in sport and that you see in these high performance teams. The themes are relevant for the rest of us. And just to carry on there with Kristen Neff's work, one of the things that she uses is called the stopwatch challenge, just to give folks a little bit of something that they can try. And this is this idea, if you do get in a situation where you're having, that negative self-talk, or you're really beating yourself up, one of her solutions is this stopwatch challenge, which is effectively you set a timer for 3 minutes, on your watch, on your phone, and with your eyes closed, you repeat 3 different sentences. The first is, this hurts. Other people, other athletes are stressed too. Be patient. I am. And then you can fill in the blank. And again, it sounds very simple. This hurts. Other people struggle too. Be patient. And then you can say, I am, whatever it might be for you. And just repeating that, again, starts to reprogram that, subconscious mind, that sort of monkey mind, if you will, that chatters at us all day long. And as we circle back to this idea of habits and automaticity, this is where, if you do this enough, all of a sudden you can really flip the switch when you do have these moments, because we're all going to have them. You're never going to eliminate the negative self-talk or these moments, but all of a sudden you've got this resiliency now where you can bounce back from those. And that is where you see those elite champions like the Roger Federers and Serena Williams, who are down in a match, who are, hit some really poor shots. And you think, geez, if I hit those poor shots, I don't know if I could ever hit another one in,
Yeah, I'd be destroyed.
You sort of you lose all your confidence, but they're able to then all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, they're back to hitting these tremendous shots. They're back to being dialed in and focused. And so the rest of us can learn a lot from that, because again, whether it's your professional life, whether it's your home life, whether it's elite sport, recreational sport, whatever it might be, the brain is definitely such a key role in all this, and emotions really drive these behaviors. And what I found was really cool, Brock, is when you talk to all these, again, sports scientists and performance staff, whether it's Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL, these are the things that they really think are the next frontier, emotions in the brain being a real driver of performance. And so we can all, I think, learn a thing or two from that.
Definitely. And I'm assuming the title of your book again is Peak, the New Science of Athletic Performance. That's Revolutionizing Sport. I'm assuming that what we're talking about here is the new science that you're referring to.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much money's gone into sports science in the last sort of decade and a half, with the explosion of sport, and all these different contracts on TV contracts and digital rights on the interwebs, and so yeah, there's a tremendous amount of research going on in that space. And the idea even of being an athlete is sort of, obviously we have our sporting athletes, but all of us, if you're human and you move, you're an athlete. You're designed to move. Sure. You're designed to do all these things. And so that's that sort of connection we're trying to make of, this isn't a different set of rules for these elite folks. Now, obviously, some of the things they do are going to be more intense, etc. But the big themes of focusing on the fundamentals, of being consistent, and with the topic that we discussed here today of around, harnessing your emotions to really drive behavior in a positive way are really crucial to being able to achieve the things that you want to achieve.
Yeah, it's interesting that even in your book, but in science in general for athleticism and sport and stuff, we don't see a lot of big changes happening in the training side of things. But what we're seeing big changes in is things like gut health and recovery science, and of course this mindset stuff that we're talking about here as well.
Yeah.
It's not, I think we've gotten as far as we can get with training harder, training faster, lifting heavier weights, and all of that kind of stuff. So the new ideas or the new science is really these other things that maybe we've overlooked in the past.
Absolutely. I mean, and even as we talk training, I mean, it's one of those things where we look for all these kind of shiny new toys, and we end up back where we were in the 40s, 50s, 60s around the same types of movements, and just figuring out the best possible way to use them. But we don't need nearly as many bells and whistles as we thought we did, and I think that's a kind of a nice thing for the rest of us as well, because if we narrow our focus a little bit in terms of the applications, whether it's on the training or nutrition front, but just make sure that we're hitting these fundamentals and these evidence-based strategies. And of course, in the book, we have a bit of an expert generalist theme as well of being able to touch in on these areas, as you mentioned, of athlete health. Just being healthy is crucial for how you think and feel and perform. And of course, on the nutrition side, getting the right fueling strategy. Just as you mentioned there, Brock, recovery is sort of this new science as well that's come out of, are you really overtraining, or actually are you not recovering enough? And so those are some big questions that are trying to be answered now. And as we've talked about today, this mindset piece being at the forefront of performance. And so, yeah, we can definitely all learn a few lessons from what the best of the best are doing.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Dr. Marc Bubbs. Again, the book's name is Peak, the New Science of Athletic Performance. That's Revolutionizing Sport, and you can find it on Amazon and all the places where you find good books. And where can people find you if they want to get some more information about you and your practice?
Fantastic. Well, appreciate you having me on, Brock. You can reach out to me on social media at Dr. Bubbs, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also they can check out the website drbubbs.com. And if you're looking for specific information around the book, the website is called athleteevolution.org, and you can check out what some of the experts and athletes are saying about the book.
And you have your own podcast as well, so the podcast listening audience might be spilling over there.
Absolutely, yeah, the Dr. Bubbs Performance Podcast, and try to connect folks with some of the PhDs and folks who are on the front lines doing all this great work, and connect you with a lot of their work and what's happening in those fields.
Awesome. I'll put links to all of those resources in the show notes over at getfitguy.quickanddirtytips.com. And thanks again, Marc. This was a great conversation. I think gave some people some things they can try and some things they can think about.
Phenomenal. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. And don't forget to tune in next week, because my next episode is going to be all about how to choose yourself a coach or a personal trainer. And I get 4 of my friends and experts to weigh in with their ideas of how to do that properly. But in the meantime, I am Brock Armstrong, the Get Fit Guy, and this podcast is written, narrated, and produced by me with editorial support from Karen Hertzberg. Our audience development and marketing coordinator here at Quick and Dirty Tips is Morgan Ratner. Our digital ad operations coordinator is Michelle Margulis. Our digital assistant is Emily Miller, and our vice president and fearless leader is Kathy Doyle. Now, what are you waiting for? Embrace that sport revolution.